So now I'd like to talk about Lino print, the technique. Here I'm going to give you information about the basic principle, which will give you a good understanding for when we start doing the practical. So Lino print is what's known as a relief method, which means cutting away with a tool the surface of the print plates to create areas or grooves or channels. Just to note here, when I say print plate, this is a common term used by printmakers, and it refers to the surface on which you're going to apply ink and print. So in some print process it could be wood, it could be silicone, it can be metal. Obviously here it's lino. So this is what I'm referring to as the print plate. And just going back now to what I was talking about, the cutting away of areas or grooves or channels. It's pretty much a form of mark making, in the same way that you make marks with a pencil on paper, with a brush on canvas, or with your fingers into clay if you were a sculptor. Those are all forms of mark making, and here cutting away the surface is just the same. It's mark making to create an impression or an image. So when the print plate is inked up, and then by that I mean the application of ink using a roller onto the surface in an even way, even and consistent, when it's inked up, no ink will actually go into those channels or those areas that have been cut away, and the ink sits on the surface, the relief. Then when you come to pressing the linoleum, the print plate down and applying pressure on the back side, the ink is transferred from the print plate directly onto the paper or whatever surface it is that you're printing onto. It could be fabric, it could be wood. And your image is replicated or created in that way. By contrast, some print process are called intaglio, and that's an Italian word. Some of you might have heard of it, and the direct translation would be carved. I like to think of it more like etched. And that would be an opposite. For information, that's an opposite process. That's where you're creating grooves and channels. You are applying ink to the surface, perhaps with a rag rather than a roller, because what you're wanting to do is push ink into the grooves, into the channels, and then in the same way, pressing your print plate down. But the paper, in this instance, it would pull the ink out of the channels. So that's intaglio, and that's the reverse. Some of you have heard of etching. That's probably the most commonly known intaglio print process. Okay, so that's the basics. So more now on mark making, and it's really important in lino cuts simply because of the restrictions you have in the range of marks that you can make. So if you think about a pencil on paper or a brush on canvas or charcoal, graphite, something like that, and you've got very heavy, thick lines and very fine, faint, delicate lines, and you've actually got a spectrum of marks in between those 2 points too. With lino, with even the most super duper tools and the ranges of ends that you can get to create the different marks, you still either got a mark that's there or not. It's either positive or not. It's printed or it's not. And actually Matisse was quite a fan of lino print, and I think his work probably hopefully demonstrates my point quite well. It's really about the marks and the fluidity of the lines and the range of the different marks that you can make with the tools that's going to make your work appealing and exciting. A point to note that the background on lino, the relief bit, the bit that's printed, it does leave behind, it's not a solid area, and obviously you'll find this yourself once we start printing. It's like a granular, spongy texture that's left behind, and the beauty of it, and it's unique for a print technique really, is that every time you print, because you're going to have a different amount of ink and apply a different amount of pressure each time, you're going to have this unique printed area, printed surface every time. Some of them will be more faint and washed out like an old photograph, and some of them might be more consistent and more solid. So you've got that element of surprise each time too. I thought these two books would be a good point to introduce these two books if you did want to read up on further reading and check out some examples or different techniques. This one on block print by Andrea Lauren, which is really great, and she's actually there's a section on mark making in here that might be useful. And small projects and things like that. And this one too is also good, making an impression. Yeah, so check these two books out. I found them invaluable, and I always take them along to any of my workshops, so I thought it would be fair to share them with you guys too. Okay, let's move on to the next section. We're going to have a practice.